The call tonight. As you can hear, this call is being recorded. I'll speak a little bit about Zoom and housekeeping in a moment, but just to say this call is being recorded. If therefore you do not want to be on the recording, the two ways to avoid that are you can obviously keep your camera off and you can change your name. If you want to change your name to something different, that's totally fine. I'll say that a couple more times as people continue joining the call. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you for being with us. I know we're a couple of minutes over time, but really appreciate it. We've got a few more people just joining the call. So I will just give us a few minutes before we kind of get started formally. For anyone who's just joined, I'll let you know that we are recording tonight's call. It will be shared publicly on social media, etc. If you do not want to be on the recording, we will cut this beginning bit off. So this is all fine. You won't be in this recording. You can obviously keep your camera off and you can change your name if you want to do that on Zoom. I'll also point out that I've got a help with tech support tonight, Esther. Esther's waving right now. So if you need help with changing your name, you can direct message Esther, and Esther can probably tell you how to do that. So it's just a handful more people coming in. So again, we'll just give everyone another minute or so. We'll get started about 5 past. But thank you for being with us. Thank you for being early. Thank you for being earlier than we were, some of you. Looks like those that are trying to get in for the moment are in. So we'll make a start. Once again, huge welcome, huge thanks. Lovely to have you here tonight. I'll just introduce myself and my colleagues here tonight, and then just do a quick piece about Zoom and housekeeping and how we're going to run tonight's event. But again, thank you, welcome. So my name is Stu Melvin. I am the Climate Justice Coalition Trade Union Caucus Coordinator. I've been a trade union organizer, trade union rep, climate justice activist for many, many years. And so this conversation around pensions obviously overlaps a lot of my kind of background or experience as well, which is really interesting. There's a huge amount of work to do on it. So I'm delighted to be hosting this tonight. I'm just going to ask, well, I think for speed, I'll introduce my colleagues on tonight's call. So for those that have only just joined, Esther is our tech support for tonight. She's just waving just now. If you have any tech issues, any problems with Zoom, you can direct message Esther and she will help you out. I'm also here tonight. We have Melina, who is now waving at the camera. Melina is the communications coordinator at Climate Justice Coalition, and again is helping and supporting tonight. And I'll introduce our speakers in a moment. Just for anyone who's just joined, I'll just repeat myself one last time. We are recording tonight's call. It will be shared on social media and stuff. If you don't want to be in that, not a problem. You obviously can keep your camera off. You can change your name. If you don't know how to change your name, direct message Esther. She'll help you change your name. Everybody else, if you're happy to have your cameras on, that would be lovely. It'd be really nice to see everybody's faces. It's always nicer to feel like you're in a room with people and can, you know, say hi and stuff. But likewise, if you want to keep them off, that's absolutely fine as well. Zoom-wise, I think probably at this point in history, we all know how to use Zoom, but just in case you don't, if you hover your mouse down around the bottom, you'll get some icons pop up. This is if you're on a computer. If you're on a mobile, it's slightly different, but if you're on a computer, hover your mouse down around the bottom, some icons will pop up. Most important one from tonight's perspective, there'll either be one that says chat or there'll be one that says more. And if you click that, then there'll be one that says chat. If you open that, later on when our speakers are finished speaking, we'll do some Q&A. And if you want to write your questions and stuff in the chat box, you'll need to obviously have the chat box open at that point. I think that's more or less it. I'm just going to quickly run through our speakers here tonight. We're super excited to have a great variety of speakers who are all going to speak for about 10 minutes or so on the subject around pensions, how pensions fit into the global finances, and also, of course, divestment and climate justice. So we're joined tonight by Stephen Smiley from the Unison National Executive Committee and from the Climate Justice Coalition Trade Union Caucus. We're also joined by Lisette Meddens from Fossil Free Netherlands. And we're also joined by Rob Noyes from Platform and UK Divest Coalition. And huge thanks to them as well for jumping on and speaking to us tonight. So we're gonna kick off. I'm gonna hand over to Stephen Smiley to start the call with a little bit of information about the Climate Justice Coalition, Trade Union Caucus, and pensions in the UK. So Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Stu, and nice to see some familiar faces and some not so familiar names. So it's great to have you come on to the meeting. As Stu said, I'm a member of Unison's National Executive Council, and I'm also the deputy convener in Scotland, in Unison Scotland. I'm a branch secretary in South Lanarkshire, and I'm a member of the local government pension scheme, Strathclyde Local Government Pension Scheme, which is the biggest of the local government pension schemes in Scotland. So I declare at the outset of these kind of discussions a vested interest in that. In not too many years from now, I will be drawing my pension, and therefore the future of pensions is personal to me as well as political. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. I'm also, as Stu said, involved in the trade union caucus of the Climate Justice Coalition. We were the trade union caucus of the COP26 coalition in the run-up to COP26, and as we transitioned into the Climate Justice Coalition, we felt it was important to maintain the trade union caucus, which initially was about mobilising people to participate in events around COP26. But we see ourselves as and have developed into essentially a trade union voice within the climate movement, and a climate voice within the trade union movement, trying to contributing to bringing those two movements together in actions, which are about defending workers' rights, jobs, workers' futures, along with fighting for real change, arguing for real change to protect the climate. And these two movements, which some people in the past argued were separate, not to share the same room, platform or Zoom call, if we had them in those days, but bringing those movements together based upon the common interest that there are no jobs on a dead planet, and by definition, there's no pensions on a dead planet either. So pensions is one of the issues where there's a clear coming together of those interests, of workers' interests and the interests of the climate, and I'll explain a wee bit about that, and I know my colleagues will expand a bit on in a minute. But it was one of the debates that we had in my own union, Unison, a number of years ago. What's the relevance? Why are we going to start talking about this? Because local government pension and other pension funds, occupational pension funds, are funds. They're funds which are built up over many years that are effectively deferred wages. They're money which should be going into the workers' pockets in respect, in the form of wages, but through agreements over many years, workers contribute to these pension funds, and their employers contribute to these pension funds. So it's deferred wages. So it's money that we are saving up for our old age, I suppose, when we retire. So our pensions are our deferred wages, and therefore, from a trade union point of view, it's important that we look to see what's happening with our pensions, because, as I said right at the outset, I've got a vested interest here. When I retire, I want to have a decent pension. I've worked for it. I've contributed to it. I've negotiated. Trade unions over many years. I've negotiated with my employer to ensure that those pensions are interested. So the debate within the union movement is about how do we secure that pension for myself and my colleagues, and not just the colleagues like me who are close to retirement age, but the young worker who's joining the company or the local government, the council this year, the 17-year-old, 18-year-old who, and God knows when they'll get to retire, but when they retire, there needs to be a sustainable and viable pension fund. So the people whose responsibility is to look after those pension funds, their first priority is to ensure those pensions are protected. And in the language of the pension management, we talk about fiduciary duty. And that was one of the big issues that when we started to raise other issues, apart from, make sure my pension was secure, we started raising issues about where are you investing the money? Where does this money go? Why is it you invest money in the Japanese metro, but you don't invest it in the Glasgow Underground? Or, things like that. We were told it's fiduciary duty. And the only thing that we're concerned about is making sure we get enough returns on our investments so that your pension is secure. Okay, that's fair enough. However, we started to explore what are the consequences of that? particularly when there was a greater awareness of climate change issues and the investments that some of our many of our pension funds, but probably all of our pension funds in the UK have over many years been putting lots of their money into fossil fuels. They've also been putting lots of money into armaments industry and using the tobacco industry and all other things which are a bit dubious as well, because you used to make lots of profit out of tobacco, and you certainly continue to make lots of profit out of armaments. And there's, so there's dubious questions about it. That's for a different webinar. In terms of fossil fuels, when we started to understand that we were facing significant climate change, a crisis was coming, and yet we were investing in the very cause of that by putting money into the exploitation of more oil and gas reserves, burning them, building, investing in infrastructure which was based upon burning more and more fossil fuels. So we started to question, this fiduciary duty, does it not actually also, if fiduciary duty is about looking after my interests and the interests of other pension fund members, should we not also be looking at our interests in a wider sense? Because as I say, I might have a great pension when I retire, but if the planet is burning, I won't be able to go on holiday to Rhodes, for example, if these things continue to happen. So we had to start thinking around that. And in Scotland, after the big pension reforms in the 1990s, where trade unions were given seats on pension boards, we then had a place at the table. So rather than just giving all our money over to councillors or other appointed fund managers to look after, we actually had access to the boards where we could sit, trade union reps along with employer reps, to do that. So I was appointed onto the Scottish Local Government Pension Scheme Advisory Board. Sounds very grand. But that's a body in Scotland which is designed, it's set up by the government to advise the government on pension, local government pensions, but also to advise the funds. There's 11 funds in Scotland, to advise them. And one of the first lectures we got, it was a lecture, they brought in these legal advisors to tell us what our role was, and there was a heavy emphasis on fiduciary duty. So, we weren't managing any funds, but we were advising people about it. So we got these lectures. And we could bring in our own lawyers and get our own legal advice to actually challenge the very narrow definition of what fiduciary duty meant. And we were able to get agreement that fiduciary duty should and could look at the wider interests of the pension fund members. And critically, they should be consulting the pension fund members on all aspects of not just the administration of the funds, but also investment strategies. I wish it was as simple as that, but that was the agreement that we got. Fiduciary duty can be interpreted in a wider way. Unison adopted a policy of support for divestment from fossil fuels at a national conference back in 2017. It was slightly funny because in Scotland we adopted it earlier, and we were producing documents jointly with Friends of the Earth Scotland, arguing for that policy. And I remember the senior official at the time telling us that he'd received a phone call from London, from headquarters, saying, "What are you doing? That's not our policy." And his response had to be, "Well, it's Scotland, it's devolved powers. This is our policy," type thing. But we did think we'd better try and address that. So from Scotland, we put in a motion to the 2017 conference arguing that we should adopt a policy of support for divestment strategies in our pension funds, and that was carried at that conference. We then Unison published a campaign document in 2018, which encouraged branches to take up the campaign. Now, just as sorry to be so inwardly looking in terms of Unison, but Unison, because of the setup of the pension boards, Unison has representatives sitting on most of the pension fund boards up and down the country. Not every council has its own pension fund. They're grouped into areas. So Strathclyde, the one I'm in, actually has 12 different local authorities and lots of other tend to be public sector bodies, voluntary organisations in it. So it's not so. Glasgow City Council runs my pension fund. I work for a different council. Well, by and large, what happens is the pension committees of the lead council, they administer, they run the scheme, but they have a board which represents employers from out with that, and also the trade unions. And so we have people, and that gives us an opportunity to actually get the information which previously was hidden in a dark cupboard somewhere. And our people are able to ask those questions. They're able to ask about strategies of investment, and it gives us a relatively powerful voice in that. It doesn't give us any decision making because we don't get to vote. That still retains with the committees. So the councillors who sit in the finance committee or the subcommittees, they're the ones who you have to influence. But the existence of trade union reps on boards has given us an opportunity to open up that. Now, there has been successes up and down in the country. I have to say that, trade unions are voluntary organisations, so we can't, whilst we've adopted a policy, we democratically cannot instruct all those representatives to go and do this. We don't have that kind of control. So we urge and we educate and we try and encourage them to do it. And one of the things which where I think that's been most successful is where they make links with, or links are made with them by community organisations that many of you may well be involved in. So in Strathclyde, we've worked closely with, I forget the name wrong, Sally will shout out at me, Fossil Free Strathclyde. There's a Lothian equivalent to that, and they organise activity, they lobby councillors, but they work closely with us, and we try to support them. One of the things, if you're a community campaigner on an issue such as this, one of the things that I encourage you to understand is trade union branches have some resources. So they have access to some of the information through their pension reps. They have access to the employers through the normal bargaining machinery, but also some resources. So if you're wanting to run a campaign to, publish leaflets or get a banner or whatever, it does no harm to approach your local Unison branch. This is Unison policy. We're supporting it in our community campaign. Let's link up. So we've did that kind of activity. We've worked with those kind of campaigns up and down the country where they're active and where our people are motivated to do so in order to achieve some things. So we get councils to pass motions, for example. So it's quite useful to have a community group along with the trade unions speaking to the council, say, look, we're in favour of this, is our pensions, this is our deferred how we think this is how you should be doing it. So getting councils to pass motions in favour of divestment is part of the tactics, and we've been quite successful in getting some councils to do that. It raises the issue, it applies pressure. A number of pension funds, pension committees up and down the country have then acted on that, and they've, to some extent, in some respects, I have to say it's a bit paper exercise. In some respects, they do it. Sometimes they consult a consultant and they write up a paper. Strathclyde, for example, big with COP26 was in Glasgow, obviously. So Glasgow were keen to be seen to be in the lead of this sort of thing, and they adopted a policy to divest. They instructed the pension fund manager to come up with a policy. He consulted the wrong kind of consultants, accountants, I think I'm calling them, who produced a document which frankly was not worth the paper it was written on in terms of actually taking it forward. They were instructed, the councillors, Fossil Free Strathclyde and ourselves made representations, and that's just not acceptable. And so it's a work in progress. In other areas, it's been a bit more successful, not been quite as greenwashing as the Strathclyde policy eventually was, but there's been successes in doing that. And from my perspective, from within Unison, but also within the Trade Union Caucus of the Climate Justice Coalition, I think pensions was a really good opportunity, a really good issue for us to bring together those movements, that the climate change movement with the trade union movement. It is about our deferred wages, it's about our pensions, and it's about our climate as well. And I would urge trade union activists, but also community activists, to get together locally and start working together, because there's so much that can be achieved by doing that. Neither of us, I think, can win it on our own. You need the workers on your side. We need to ensure that the workers' interests are looked after when we're talking about big changes like this, but it can be done. It has been done, and I know we're going to hear some good examples of where it has been successful internationally. So I'm going to finish at that and hope we have I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and questions later on. Thank you. Thanks, Stu.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, David. Really appreciate it. That was really great. Thank you very, very much. folks, obviously we will do sort of Q&A later in the call after everybody's finished speaking. But if you do want to start putting questions in the chat box, that's absolutely fine. If people are able to answer it, feel free to answer each other's as well. Feel free to discuss there and jump in while people are speaking. But thank you very much to Stephen Smiley. I'm going to introduce quickly our next speaker, Lisette Maddens from Fossil Free Netherlands. Lisette, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm already sharing my screen, I think. Let me see how I can then go to the present mode. Oh, gosh. Technique.
I think if you click slideshow
Um,
over on the right.
yeah, but I have a Zoom screen up front. Here. View slideshow. Here we go. Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, thanks for the invitation. Lovely to be with you tonight. I prepared a couple of slides to share a story from the Netherlands. So I'm Lisette. I founded Fossil Free the Netherlands. Yeah, we are a small NGO in the Netherlands, the Dutch branch of 350.org. You might know the organization, and we are here to build a climate justice movement, as I hear, like you all are working hard for that, which is so needed in current times with heat waves and really devastating impacts we see all across the globe. So yeah, and we focus on the big money. So yeah, we focus on pension funds, banks. We used to focus on all public institutions, but right now we broadened our scope a little bit. But our main aim is to build that people-powered movement to break the power of the fossil fuel industry, basically to speed up the transition for a fair and just society. And yeah, we used to be with the three of us. You can see us here, me, Marianne, and Hiske, but now the team has grown, and so we are 8 at the moment. And so this means we also have more campaigns going on in our organization. So right now, one of our focus campaigns is the ING Bank. Yeah, one of the big banks who's still heavily invested in fossil fuels. We do file a lawsuit against KLM, our aircraft company, who against their greenwashing because of their advertising. We are developing a new gas campaign focused on LNG. We still keep our pension fund campaign going because this was our previous big focus campaign. And of course, we all do this by people power. So we have a fossil free network that we support, and we have all these groups that we try to hold together. And we also do a lot of coalition work like you do. We are also organizing for the COP in a big coalition here in the Netherlands with also Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth. And but today I'll focus on our ABP campaign, a story of how we focused on one of the biggest pension funds of Europe, the ABP. And this is when it started back in 2013. The fossil-free divestment movement started in the US, and it flew over to Europe and Australia. And we started campaigning in the Netherlands at universities. But first, we saw the universities didn't have such ties to the fossil fuel industry. And so we were stuck a bit. And then we figured, but our pension fund actually does have these direct investments in these big fossil fuel corporations. So back in 2013, we started with a letter and a petition. And we decided actually to focus on this pension fund because all of our teachers in the Netherlands and all of the people working in the government sector, they are obliged to have their pension with the ABP. This means that, this is a bit of a crumbly slide, but this means that there's 3 million participants in this pension fund, so it's huge. There's like over 500 billion euro of assets in the pension fund. And 15 billion euros was invested in the fossil fuel industry. So this was just huge. And we started this campaign, like I said, here in 2013 with just a letter written by different organizations, and we were invited in the boardroom. But yeah, not much changed really. They didn't take us serious. Well, we had this petition in 2014, then they started paying attention because we went over the 10,000, so that was nice. We had some media attention. But after that, it was really hard to build up the pressure towards this enormous fund. So in 2020, we decided to relaunch the campaign and to really, with our tiny organization, we were only three at the moment, to focus all of our work on the ABP basically, and to collaborate also with the pension participants. Together with the teachers, as you can see here, we relaunched, we did creative actions. And then in June 2021, we mobilized basically all these different pension participants groups in one big demonstration. And you can see here the different groups. So it was like civil servants at the municipality of Amsterdam, people from higher education in Utrecht, people from the water authorities. Like different groups started to organize under their own name and with their own colleagues, calling on their board of directors to put then pressure on the ABP. So like with a second step in between, like there is the employees called on their directors and board of directors to then send a letter to the ABP. And then what happened was all these groups started organizing, and more institutions started to write letters to the ABP, and the pressure was built up. And so when we first started with the lobby and research, then we saw the movement was broadened, and also Extinction Rebellion joined, and several times the lobby was occupied of the ABP by pension participants themselves. So it was teachers, professors, under the banner of Extinction Rebellion, but actually occupying the offices of the ABP. And so we saw that the pressure was really on. So there were different institutions who called out the ABP, but still they wouldn't respond. So still they wouldn't divest, because that was our big demand, of course, divest from fossil fuels. And then we decided to start a lawsuit, to announce a lawsuit to bring them to court if they wouldn't divest. This was a bit tricky because we were such a small organization bringing such a large financial institution to court, but we had great support, and we really thought we really had a case. And so this was a headline in the newspaper: a new climate case was to be launched. And then in the October 2021, in the week when we decided to launch the suitcase and hand over the summons to the ABP, then we organized a People's Assembly, actually, with all these pension participants to decide if we were actually going to do this. And when we prepared then to hand over the summons, we got the email in our inbox from the ABP that they decided to actually meet our demands and divest all their oil, coal, and gas assets, all their assets from the fossil fuel industry, to divest them within a year, basically. And so by the first quarter of 2023, so this year, they would have divested all their assets in fossil fuels. And so, so just to round this off, this is where we are right now. They have at the moment divested actually 9 billion euros of their assets. Still 6 billion is stuck. So at the moment we have been writing a letter to them with all these initiatives to figure out where this money ends up and how they can actually get it out of fossil fuels, the last bit, so to say. Still quite some money. And so now we are focusing also on our other campaigns that, as I just shared. Just to round off, I just want to share some key lessons from this campaign. We saw what really helped us to get to this success was a broad movement, with really pension participants being the central organizers. we organized pressure from the bottom up. So really just people organizing their colleagues and asking their board of directors to then pressure ABP. We used a diversity of tactics. So we used and lobby and research and conversations, but also direct action, like you saw with the escalation. And we did escalate. So we had one goal, one demand, and then we escalated over time, actually within 1 year when we relaunched the campaign. And we built a convincing story. So with solid argumentation and scientific proof, and we published some argumentation on our website, and we found that actually the board members themselves used that argumentation in their conversation in the board to come up eventually with this decision to divest. So that really helped. And maybe good to mention is that also our trade unions are also part of our board member structure in our pensions. So the trade unions were actually really fundamental. We had one group actually organizing and pressuring the trade union person in the board of the ABP, which also was a really key thing that helped our campaign. Yeah, that was it. So thanks very much. And yeah, looking forward to hear more, and later ready for some questions as well. Let me see how I can start.
Thank you so much, Lizette. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. What a practical, inspiring story for everybody here interested, concerned about building up the fight for pensions divestments. You know, and often, you know, some of us might be in real small groups in a workplace, 2 or 3 people, or in a like you say, a university or in something else, and wondering, you know, how are we ever going to get to the scale of movement building to really have impact? And you've shown exactly how we do that so well. So thank you so much for that. Really lovely. No further ado, I'll move us on to our third, final, last but not least, speaker, Rob Noyes from Platform and the UK Divest Coalition. Rob, over to you.
Thanks so much, Stu, and to our other speakers. It's super inspirational to hear from you. I'm Rob. I work as a researcher and campaigner at Platform, a climate justice collective operating across the UK. In my day job, I coordinate UK Divest, a distributed network campaign to divest pension funds from fossil fuels. We've secured over 60 councils' support for divestment through motions, commitments of various forms, often partial, from dozens of funds. And we've got some new research on council holdings coming out later this year, so please watch this space. Today, however, I'm going to be focused a little less on what we do day to day, but if you're keen to get involved in fossil divestment campaigning in the UK, get in touch. If you need me to come and do a stump speech on divestment to your council or trade union group, we do this all the time and would be really happy to do so again. Perhaps because I do that all the time, I'm afraid I'm going to be speaking a little bit more off the cuff today about what pensions are, why they matter, and hopefully pose some interesting provocations about how we can scale fossil fuel divestment demands for broader social and climate justice ends. Pensions are a site of political struggle. As previous speakers have pointed to, our pensions make tomorrow. What they invested in and how they are managed matters for all of us. For pension holders, as Stephen has rightly laid out, a pension is a deferred wage that you decide to receive later. It literally makes your tomorrow. Beyond your personal pension, pensions are financially important too. In the UK, pension funds manage assets amounting to 124% of GDP, with dozens of billions of pounds in savings deposited annually. And for most people across the world, your direct contact with a pension fund is very limited. It's just one of many ways your natural resource and labour is violently extracted from you. In these contexts, the role of pension funds and their role in the economy is of vital importance. Yet, for the most part, pensions remain under-discussed in the UK. A fifth of UK adults don't know if they have a pension. 3/4 of UK adults don't know how much they have in a pension. 2/3 don't know their pension is invested in anything. And fewer still are actively involved in decisions regarding how their pension is invested. This is not to blame individual pension holders, anyone on this call. You're not supposed to know anything about big financial institutions. That includes pensions. While we silently save, asset management firms consolidate their control of our pension funds, managers hoover up executive pay, and our pensions invest in increasingly risky asset classes, both wreck the world and risk financial crises in the UK. There is a long history behind this story. We're not going to delve into detail of that now, don't worry. There are also many other points to the story that I don't have time to explore. It would be useful, for example, to explore the inequality inherent in pension provision across and within borders. In the UK, the top 10th of pension holders own the equivalent wealth of the bottom 50%. It would be instructive too to explore the deleterious effects of asset management ownership and control of the economy, or the various reforms of state pension fund provision. But again, we're not going to discuss that now. It's a massive oversimplification, so forgive me, but it boils down to this. The pension fund industry is a vehicle for asset management firms to capture workforce wages and invest that capital against workers' interests often, sometimes to the detriment of us all. It doesn't have to be that way. The first provocation I have for you tonight is this question. What if we controlled what we already own? There are 1.5 billion people around the world who now own a decent range of companies through their savings in their pension fund. In the UK, more than 30 million workers save into occupational savings and schemes. These pension fund assets have grown in value over the last decades, in many cases becoming majority shareholders of many of the world's public and private companies. This means that through our pensions, workers could be said to own a good number of companies. At present, this does not extend, for the most part, to control of these companies. In fact, often the opposite is true. Corporations polluting the environment, paying extortionate executive pay, and driving down conditions will often, at least in part, be owned by workers themselves through their pension fund. But what if that ownership did extend to control? As one of the key institutional investors in the economy, perhaps pension funds need to have the public in control to socialize the return on that investment. Fundamentally, I think the Labour movement faces an urgent choice: to use the full range of tools at our disposal or continue to allow our capital to be used against us. Over the last 10 years, the fossil fuel divestment movement has achieved incredible successes, some of which we've heard about tonight. The logic of these campaigns has been to stigmatize the oil and gas industry and to highlight the financial risks inherent to carbon-intensive holdings, with a view to both activities enabling legislative action to regulate the fossil fuel industry out of existence without majorly threatening workers' pensions. It's undeniable that these campaigns have achieved one of these aims, stigmatizing the oil and gas industry. As yet, I don't believe they have achieved the other two. But these campaigns do something else too. They crack a window into how pension funds operate, who they are responsible to, what they invest in, and who has the ability to influence how they are managed. At their best, fossil fuel divestment campaigns don't merely lower fossil fuel investment by pension schemes, as great as that is. They also encourage a divestment from some of the logics of neoliberalism itself by rejecting the practices of asset management firms running our pensions in favor of citizen-led, climate-friendly investment decisions. They also strike at the heart of what it is to have a pension, illustrating at times the incompatibility of amoral profit-seeking economic activity and building a better world. You have a pension to use for your retirement, but if your pension invests in the destruction of your retirement, you have no future, no retirement. This philosophical perspective dovetails basic financial awareness too. Across the OECD, pensions invest nearly £1 trillion in fossil fuel assets. Not only does this fuel the climate crisis, it poses huge financial risks to the economy too. As time passes, the risk of these assets being devalued increases as the worth of fossil fuels declines. In short, if it's bad for the environment, it's bad for your retirement. This reveals something important. At its most transformative, a campaign for fossil fuel divestment is not merely a call for reduction in fossil investment, but a call to fundamentally transform how workers' capital is controlled and for whose benefit. To leverage the successes of the fossil fuel divestment movement, I think we need to move beyond divestment and bring it back to some basic principles. Who owns it, who controls it, who benefits, who pays. And we need to move the focus back to the state. If we pour too much energy in our campaigns into encouraging financial institutions to do the right thing, we implicitly accept the idea that the financial sector can solve the climate crisis which it largely caused. My personal belief is that that is nonsense. The state can and must drive transition if it is to succeed and if we are to reap the benefits of that transition. I could now detail the ways pension funds could be reformed, reimagined, recaptured, reallocated, and managed for the public good. There is a long history of trade union discourse, academic literature, and public policy proposals surrounding these ideas, including worker representation on company boards, transformation of public pensions to invest in green infrastructure, and much, much, much more. But instead, I leave you with two propositions. The first is simple and is one I've said before, so forgive me. If it's bad for the environment, it's bad for your retirement. If you haven't already, organise for your pension to divest from fossil fuels. We've heard some great ideas of how to do that tonight, and organisations like Unison and UK Divest can give you a helping hand. The second is a provocation for us, as climate organisers, and as many of you will be, divestment organisers. How do we leverage fossil fuel divestment to democratise pensions and build a future worth retiring into? Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. And again, what an inspiring talk and inspiring vision there. Obviously, this is part of the Climate Justice Coalition's programme of events under the banner of We Make Tomorrow. And really the thought behind that, we started with a conference last year. We're hoping to repeat that conference later this year and then do further around the UK. But part of the thought there is to regain that historical narrative of the working class as the creators of wealth, and therefore what should be the owners of wealth, regain a sense of a workers' democracy and workers' control. And I think you really spoke to that tonight. And there's a couple of questions in the chat box that will touch on that as well. So huge thank you to Rob, huge thank you to Lizette, huge thank you to Stephen for being our speakers tonight. We'll take a few questions. As I say, we've only got probably about 5 or 10 minutes on questions. And then what we're going to do after that is move into some breakout rooms to have a conversation at a more grounded level, smaller groups, around what we can do to scale up campaigns and the fights, as Rob says, for divestment, but not only for divestment, but for democratization and for wider workers' control. So I'll pull on a few of the questions, but if yours doesn't get chosen, I'm super sorry. In case you haven't noticed, my laptop basically shut down halfway through that, so I've moved on to my phone, so it's going to be slightly more sketchy than it was. But we will get there. But if our other speakers or any other participants want to answer other questions in the chat box, please do. That's totally fine. So I'm going to kick off with, I think, probably a couple of questions that are most clearly kind of directed at Stephen. Stephen, if I just throw a couple at you. So the first one here is about, does anyone have ideas for bargaining around this? Interesting to hear ideas, how we can raise more awareness across our unions. And kind of linked into that, somebody also asked, particularly within your union, Stephen, somebody asked, how do we, Unison members, influence Unison reps on pension boards or potentially replace them if they don't support divestment? So, Stephen, do you want to come in on those?
Yeah, sure. In the last part of that, I've replied in the chat. I mean, all pension board reps should be elected anyway. There'll be a variety because they represent the fund. They'll possibly represent a number of different branches. So there needs to be a discussion with those branches about how do we elect our rep and how do we hold them accountable? Is there an annual meeting that they give a report on? Do they share the minutes of the board meetings and so on and so forth? You know, it should be like every other union rep. They should be held accountable. We passed a policy at Unison Conference last year to say that every branch excuse me, should appoint a green officer or an environment officer to take forward climate change issues generally within each branch and try to influence the bargaining agenda. But that person should be working with the pension reps to take forward these policies. And frankly, you know, if like every other union rep, if they're not doing what the members want them to do, if they're not following unison policy, then there should be a democratic mechanism for replacing them. If there isn't, if somebody's been appointed and just left to go on with it, then the union branch needs to address that issue as they would in any other way. In terms of how we can raise awareness of it, I mean, Rob talked about getting speakers along to branches. We had also Sophie Strathclyde along to our branch, did an absolutely brilliant presentation, and that just you know people were fed up listening to me go on about it. You know, bringing somebody else in with a bit of possibly a bit more talent, a bit more knowledge, and whatever, and a better PowerPoint presentation. You know, meant that the branch was solidly behind it. So doing that is a good way of doing it. Opening that up to having that with your activists, the shop stewards, but trying to involve other people as well. And that it's also, if you're going to do that, it might actually be worthwhile identifying if there's any, in our case, council branches. If there's councillors who might want to come along, or even, dare I say it, members of other trade unions, because they also have reps on the pension board. So Unison in local government terms, Unison is the one who's been most active in this issue. GMB and Unite, who are the other two main unions, are less so, and we need to engage with them. So engaging with people in the discussion, sharing the information, and engaging them to take actions. I mean, Lisette was talking about a petition and a letter. So yes, get members to sign a letter to send it to their councillor, asking them to support a motion at council. All those sorts of activities to just raise awareness, get more people involved. And when you get the appropriate numbers of support, yes, think about whether it's a lobby outside the meeting of the pension committee or the pension board, handing in the petition, get people to come along. So all of these things help to raise, get more activists involved, because there'll be people who are not really wanting to be a union rep in the traditional sense, but they're interested in the climate, they're interested in these kind of issues, and you can actually draw more people and more union members into union activity through these kind of things as well. So you actually broaden the base of the union by engaging in these kind of campaigns. I'm sure there's lots of other ideas that other people in other branches who are on the call can talk about as well, but those are the sort of things which I think as basics we can all do locally.
Brilliant, thanks, Stephen. And yeah, if you or anybody else does want to chip in the chat box with your ideas, do so. That's part of why we're here for. Let's share some ideas. I'll take a couple more questions. And I wonder, these kind of feel like these might be well directed at either both you, Lisette, and you, Rob. So there's quite a few questions around the alternatives. And obviously you touched on it a bit, Rob. Lisette, it'd be really interesting to know what your thoughts were from a campaigning perspective in terms of, I guess some of what Rob was saying as well. In terms of, to what extent to build successful campaigns, we stay really heavily focused on that clear goal of divestment, or whether we're thinking more widely about, what the alternatives are, whether we're asking, these organizations to kind of be good, or whether we're looking at state pensions and other things. Somebody else asked, I don't know if you know the answer to this, somebody else asked whether pensions in Europe are less invested in private kind of markets. So yeah, those questions. And I think also then the question around, how to kind of break this into public consciousness, and Rob, you're obviously talking about the kind of low engagement in the UK with pensions, and I was thinking about the fact that hasn't seemed to be the case. I could be wrong, it's always hard to tell what's going on in other countries, but it doesn't seem to be the case across Europe. So again, Lisette, any thoughts you have on how you've kind of like exploded that into people's consciousness through your campaign? So if either of you want to come in on any of those points, that would be super welcome. Maybe let's do alphabetical order. So Lisette, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, I can start and then you can fill me in, Rob. Yeah, I think the alternatives, they become more and more important, I think. Because like but it's a thing we've been struggling with quite a bit, I must say. We always get the question, so if we divest from fossil fuels, what do they need to invest in then? And we have been saying that it's quite difficult for us as activists, as campaigners, to give them basically investor advice, because it's very complicated, because they you know, they have all their shares and their profits and their margins, and their targets and everything. And we as activists, we normally would just say, you know, reinvest in renewable, community-owned renewable energy. But of course, it's not a specific investment product. But this is something that we are looking into a bit more and more, like also creating a more specific vision of what do we want the future to look like. I think the time is really there to be more concrete and upfront of what it is that we want the transformation to look like, basically, and to create that appealing vision of a more sustainable planet where we are moving towards. So I think that is also up to us. But then transforming that into an investor advice, that's a bit harder, I think. And then the second question on like creating that consciousness, like for us, it was also hard at the beginning to get people interested in their pension, because, you know, a pension is quite something abstract, it's far away. You know, you don't deal with it every day. You get sometimes a letter and it's a boring letter, right? So nobody is really engaged in the topic, or was engaged. But what we did was actually reframed it a bit in a different way. And what we said was, okay, this is not just your pension, but it's actually a very large pot of money, and it's your money because you have to contribute to it every month. And you can use it to make a difference, because if you are worried about the climate, you know, you can bother about your own behavior, but the climate crisis is such a huge crisis. If we want to tackle this on the level it plays out, you know, we have to look at the big money and the big institutions. So we framed it a bit different, and we noticed when we got like lots of more and more people involved, even Fridays for Future, like young people were there at a pension demonstration, you know. So it worked in some way. We managed to get the buzz around pensions, which was quite hard at the beginning, I must say. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks so much for that, Lizette, and for some of the questions. The first question in terms of like alternatives, I think I completely agree to some degree with Lizette's instinct there of saying, like, if people that are paid in some cases like £100,000 as asset management investment consultants to be providing advice to a council on how they invest, and then somebody's turning back to you and saying, what do you think? I think there's a part of your response that has to be about, well, no, like there are some broad principles that we want, like don't invest in oil extracting companies, and you work out the rest to a degree, and we'll scrutinize that. I think to some degree you have to throw the question back and go, this isn't something that's justifiable for you to be asking me to, as a campaigner, describe what you as a paid investment consultant want the fund to invest in. That being said, I think there are some really important questions that we can ask. And I think it's more taking it back to that of what your role is as a campaigner is not to provide investment strategy. There are other mechanisms for that, and also should be elected mechanisms for people to have oversight of that, such as through trade union representatives on pension boards. I think it is the case, unfortunately, that divestment commitments aren't all equal. ESG funds that you invest in aren't all equal in terms of whether they actually are ESG funds. Quite a large proportion do continue to have fossil holdings, unfortunately. So that's your first question. Does it invest in the problem, like a company that spends money on fossil fuels? If so, it's probably not the right fund for you to invest in your green funds. Two, does it invest in things that drive changes in the real economy that lead to environmental change? For example, quite a lot of pension funds will divest from fossil fuels and invest in Microsoft instead. That's fine. I don't really understand what Microsoft are doing to tackle the climate crisis. I don't know how that makes them a green fund. It just means that they're not the worst fund. So you want to ask a question like, Does it invest in things that actually tackle changes in the real economy? Third question you want to ask, is it vocal? Is it vocal about the need for political action? Divestment commitments are, as we discussed earlier, absolutely depend on the vocal element of explaining as a pension fund why you are not investing in fossil fuels, why you think that fossil fuel companies' strategies are not compliant with any form of climate goals, and encouraging for further action to take place in both the financial and the political sector. So really the question for you as the campaigner is moving it back to how do we amplify and leverage this commitment? Because if you're in, I don't know, wherever you are in the UK, sure, it's great if your local government pension scheme is divesting, but it's way better if your local government pension scheme is divesting and then saying everybody else needs to divest now. You got to get out. This is crazy. What are you doing? Because that's the thing that's driving further political action and further financial action too. In terms of some of the questions on what understanding pensions in the UK comparative to other European countries, I can't really get into that right now because I think I'd end up speaking for way too long, and I've already spoken for too long already. So I'm just going to pause it there, but really happy to continue that conversation elsewhere for sure.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all those questions, folks. And do keep them coming. You know, we can keep answering stuff in the chat box, and we can put out more information from Rob, from Lizette, from Stephen, from others around these issues. As I said, we're going to jump into breakouts now. We're going to go into breakouts for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. Let you guys have time to have some real conversation. Come back for a quick bit of feedback in the chat box. And you know, any kind of next steps and stuff like that before we close around about 8:30. So yeah, again, want to just give a huge thank you to our speakers, to Stephen, to Lizette, to Rob. My colleague Esther is ready with the breakout rooms, so we'll open the breakout rooms now. The question for those is if you're already involved in pensions divestment or reinvestment or transformation campaigns, what's working, what's not, what more is needed, and if you're not involved, what do you need to get involved? What help do you need to get involved to be able to help scale up and build out our fights around climate justice, pension divestment, etc. So yeah, about between 15 and 20 minutes. We'll jump into breakouts of 5 to 7 people. So Esther, over to you if you're ready. Let's open the rooms. Let's have a chat.
They've opened now, so you should be able to jump in to one.
Thanks very much. If anyone is struggling to get into your rooms, post in the chat box. We'll be able to help you out and get you into your breakout room so you can join in the conversation.
Just a note that some of the rooms look a bit small, I think, because quite a few people left when we opened the rooms. If people here are having trouble joining, give me a shout and I'll see what I can do to help you get in. Yeah, lots of the rooms only look like they've got about 3 people who've joined. So what I might do is ask Stu you to jump into those smaller rooms and let them know that what we're going to do is just move the people and merge them into a bigger room. But could you jump into room 2 and let them know that we're going to move them? If not, actually, I can just do it. Don't worry. I'll be back here in a sec.
No, it all sounds like good. All good.
Yeah, thanks, Esther. I wanted to say yes. For folks listening in, I wanted to say yes there, but I'm on my phone and I was trying to figure out how to do it. It wasn't working. So yeah, Esther's safe today. She's helping us out there. Those of you that are still in this room, that's totally fine as well. Obviously, if you do want to join your breakout rooms and you're not sure how to do that, let us know in the chat box. We'll sort you out, hook you up. But But if you're staying in this main room, that's absolutely fine. If you just want to stay quiet, make a cup of tea, whatever, that's fine. Likewise, if you've got burning questions, feel free to come in and chat here. I'm sure we'll have a chat. Esther, I'll leave you trying to sort out the breakouts. But yeah, Stephen, Lizette, Rob, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for your contributions.
Yeah, I enjoyed the contributions from Rob and Lisette. They were really good.
Thanks. Yeah, same.
Yeah, likewise. I hope that was useful.
It really was, and I think these are really important questions around, that thing. I mean, for some folks, like, it's super important at this stage to be thinking, like, how do I build a campaign? Lizette, that basic step by step is exactly what people need, right? What are the key points of how to build a campaign up from nothing and have impact? And then I think likewise, there's other folks who have been involved for quite a long time and have already, been involved in big campaigns. But as you were saying, Rob, like the kind of the wider transformation and that provocation around, like, how do we leverage this into a wider transformation is so important. So yeah, thank you for those. And for us, obviously, I think Stephen, myself, others on this call would all agree that the trade unions have such a potentially huge and important role to play in that transformation. So
yeah, the challenge within the trade union movement, frankly, is just getting it prioritised. That's the issue. I mean, we win the arguments at the debate, we get the policy, getting people to actually act on it when they've got so many other immediate demands on them about whether it's pay or the cuts and stuff like that. So there is always a challenge there. So you just need to keep plugging away at it to a certain extent, don't you? And make the links and understand. I mean, we in Scotland, we part of the point here is to actually get people to understand more about their pensions. Like Rob was making, people don't know anything, but they only get interested in a pension when they're approaching pension age. How much am I getting type thing? And so one of the benefits of this kind of campaign is actually they start to ask other questions about how their pensions are managed. And all the pension funds, 11 pension funds in Scotland, they all employ the same private investment managers. So they're paying fees constantly to all of those people. And we've, based upon some of the experience in Holland, in fact, we've demonstrated in evidence that actually if you could insource and make those investors in-house, pay them in-house, merge some of the funds so you're dealing with bigger funds, you can actually save huge amounts of money for the council, for the employers. So that would actually contribute to promoting services and saving jobs at a local level. So making those kind of links gets people more interested in pension, not just in relation to climate, but a whole range of other issues that pensions are important.
100%. Also, like, I think when you then look at like the type of advice that the people that they're paying are giving, it's astonishing that they get away with it, to be honest. Like, you're having these big, this is true for Holland as well, but you're kind of companies like Mercer's giving this climate risk advice that is saying 4, 5, 6 degrees of warming, don't worry about it, it's fine. It's not going to impact the portfolio. And people listen to this stuff. Like, they genuinely have, like, I've seen stuff from Mercer's where they're genuinely stating, like, Los Angeles, London, go underwater, that's good for your portfolio because it means we're gonna build stuff. So don't worry about it, it's good. Like, and that's the kind of data that these guys are given, that then councillors that sit on these committees are asked to take seriously. It's astounding, really. I think, like, problematizing the advice that's being given is also a really fascinating way into that conversation of why are we infantilizing government to not be able to make these decisions? Because the advice they're being given is absurd to the highest.
Stu, were you there? We had like a pension advisor come and give us all that talk at work, and someone was like, but why would I pay into my pension? Like, why are you assuming the pension market's even going to exist as it will in like 50 years when I'm going to take my pension? Why do you want me to put more money in it? And this guy just looked terrified. It was like it never crossed his mind.
Yeah, he was so struggling with that question. It's just like so difficult. Yeah,
I'm kind of really interested in that as like scaling up UK Divest campaigns in a way that is interesting, kind of really fascinating by what it would look like to escalate in a major way in doing something akin to that, of through something like auto enrollment, essentially taking a Don't Pay UK approach and saying, we're all not, if we get to this number, we're all not going to pay into our pension for this month. And God forbid, maybe like put that into a strike fund, like great, in terms of like linking up with broader justice-based initiatives. I'd love to see that kind of movement develop in the UK.
Definitely. I was involved in organising Don't Pay UK, so we could definitely have a chat about it.
These are the connections. This is what we need.
There you go.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I was a young revolutionary, one of my comrades, older comrades, and his wife, so we're not in the pension fund because the revolution will come and we'll not need a pension. And I have to say, I clearly wasn't revolutionary enough because I didn't take his advice. I stayed in the pension fund. So it's a gamble, but
Yeah, in the Netherlands, actually, there is an initiative for people who want to strike paying their taxes because the government is not doing enough for climate action. And actually, they are already, I believe, for a part, not paying taxes, like for exactly what was it again? Is that exactly the part that they're failing the policy or something? Should look it up, but it's an interesting escalation tactic, and I think it's really time to escalate.
To be honest, the reason I think it's exciting is more also from the possibility of like the attack. Like the attack would be very strongly along the lines of, why are you telling people not to save? Like that's a terrible idea. And the kind of response to that is, well, like, what's the advice that you're giving them? Like, because it's even worse. Like, sure, the advice of don't save is bad advice and it's irresponsible advice. That's just true. Also, it's better than the alternative because the alternative is so warped and crazy.
Yeah.
Hey, Pauline, we've got people in breakout groups. You should be able to press a button to join one if you want to. If not, you're welcome to stay and sit and listen to us have a chat.
Oh, you're
I
on mute,
can't hear
Pauline.
you. You're
Sorry.
muted.
I
There we
pressed
go.
the button for meeting room 4. I thought that's where I was.
Oh, let me. I'll put you in again, and it should pop up again. Yeah, no, you're still just in the main room at the moment. One sec.
I am quite curious about those breakouts, so I'm gonna pop in.
Yeah,
Well,
go
let
and-
me play, yeah.
You're
Yeah,
a
go for it.
co-host, so you should be able to just join one.
Okay, I'll just join one.
We'll give it another 5-6 minutes kind of thing. So feel free if you want to.
There we go, Pauline. You should have one pop up now for you to go and have a look in.
I'm afraid I've come straight from another call, so I'm not jumping in. I've not got the brain space for that now.
No, I think absolutely fair play. You've done an amazing job considering
Yeah,
you
two
jumped from
Zooms
one
back to back. That's a hardcore evening.
how did the other meeting go, Rob?
It was good. It was a bit chaotic. So for others, this was the Fossil Free Parliament campaign launch, which is asking MPs to pledge not to receive fossil fuel funding. That's kind of the first ask of that. It was good. It had a very nice grassroots atmosphere in terms of lots of people coming in the chat and going, "Oh, this is fantastic! Love to see it." But also some parts of that involving me being chair and also spotlighting people and also introducing speakers and kind of going, yeah, this is chaotic. Would kind of love to have a tech support right now for sure.
Well, we can hire out Esther to in future.
Yeah.
As in Parliament, there'll be an MP's pensions committee or something, isn't there? Take it.
Yeah.
And does that look at the wider? Because there used to be, obviously when they're doing legislation, it's wider. Does that have a remit to look at pensions? Because one of the things about pension policy, some of our MPs should be asking the kind of questions that you're posing, but you don't hear any of them actually interested. Almost, it's difficult to get them to actually understand.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to me. genuinely fascinating to me how like limited and discussion on pensions over the last kind of 20
Yeah.
years has been. Like this was a really live issue, like a really important thing. You even have someone like Harold Wilson saying that like pension fund reform was the most meaningful thing that happened while he was alive. And you're kind of going, for it to go from that level of high bar
Yeah.
to it's now where it's like
We can talk about it.
not on the agenda for 90% of people in Parliament for sure, is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, we find the same in Scotland when we're talking to MSPs. They just don't know. I mean, the government, the main issue in the government asked us at the advisory board level was about whether we could get them to invest in local infrastructure. Of course, the response is, well, you know, if you want our pension funds to invest in your pet projects, you're going to have to come up with some justifiable and give us, give to the pension funds models to invest in, because you have to have returns. You know, and they didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue how it worked. Actually, it was just it was a pot of money. Could we get that? No, you can't get it. No, you can't. It's your money. No, yours.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I think that was my kind of feeling of, there was a question in the chat of, you know, pension funds being encouraged to invest in things like infrastructure and private equity. And I'm always come back to that, like, regardless of whether it's good or bad, the first question, if government's asking you to do that, is like, why aren't you doing it? Like, just like, what? Yeah, why are you asking somebody else to, like, it's so strange. And you ask that question back and there's no reply. There's just like, oh no, it's just, it would be nice if you could, minimum 5%, please. And you're thinking like, well, there's a reason that that's not happening, because it needs to be based on like an actual plan, like not just, more kind of Teesside shit. Bizarre, yeah.
We'll bring people back in a couple of minutes, but I think, you know, one of the things that strikes me is like thinking about workers' control and what that means, and how huge a leap that is, even from like the current model of kind of trade unionism, and let alone obviously for workers that are not in a union and stuff. And I'm always struck by, you know, they're kind of cliches, but I mean, I remember being in a factory occupation, visiting a factory occupation some years ago. And the workers there, you know, they were staying overnight, they were around a campfire, and they were all having a conversation about, well, you know, if we kept the factory, what could we do with it? And they made car parts, and they were in their minds, in that hour and a half that I was sat there, they had changed their factory. They were no longer making car parks. They were making recycling stuff, wheelie bins, all kinds of other stuff. I think they made bumpers and plastics, you know, so they were making recycling stuff. And it's kind of fascinating. It's like almost chicken or egg. Like, you know, do you need that kind of experience of getting a bit of control first to then be able to imagine what else you do, you know? And it's like, so, you know, do we start talking about pensions, or do we have them take control of something little at work in order to then think about it more widely? I don't know. It's a hard strategic question. But
I think it also has to do with like, people have had to fight so hard to just get that like trade union representation on the pension board itself. So like, are you going to do anything to risk that? Like, you have this limited degree of oversight that's really important, especially for this question. Like, this agenda is progressed by like 1 or 2 councillors on a pension committee and or a trade union rep. Like, if you're doing something too fast, then you're essentially jeopardizing the one access point that you have. I get the fear to like do something too strong too quickly.
It's also, I mean, so there's questions asked about training and stuff like that, and because it's the point you're making, they bring in these experts and they say, no, you can't do that, and it's kind of, right, okay, so it's for your average trade union rep who, you know, we need to do more to train them up so they actually understand it. If your average trade union rep is, oh God, I'm intimidated by that. So there's a long process, and unfortunately we don't have time. Unfortunately, we need to do it quicker. But you know, we need to extend the understanding of it, and that's why these kind of meetings are actually great. I mean, we've obviously Rob and Andrew Dobbins, and if you've been speaking to Andrew about that, that's really good. I'll pick that up with as well, because we've been talking about how do we how do we, his job is not specifically about divestment, it's about pension investments and stuff like that, and representation. But it's one way of getting people involved and interested and learning about the process. And it opens up all sorts of other opportunities, because the point you were making about pension funds have these investments, and there's been some work in the past about getting the pension funds to intervene in, company AGMs about their ethical policies and stuff like that. So actually, when you start thinking about it, there's so much more. Obviously, there's people who try to raise Palestine issue, the BDS campaigns and stuff like that. The government trying to ban that. So there's a whole range of things that actually that power, that workers' power, could be used if we just educate ourselves and think it through and build work with allies who are involved in that field. It's actually potentially hugely transformative of not just the way unions work, but actually the economy as well.
Yeah, completely. Let's bring people back, I think.
Yeah.
Are we having feedback now, or how are we winding
So
up?
we got 10 minutes. Do you think? Do you want to hear it verbally, or should we just ask people to type in the chat box and I'll sort of highlight a few points? What do you think's best?
How many groups further?
There are only 3 groups, so I think we can ask them all to do a
Yeah.
little short verbal
Yeah.
feedback.
Fantastic. I can never remember on Zoom if I say group 1, are people going to know like I'm in group 1 or whatever?
Well, they will if they've paid attention, but probably not.
Welcome back, folks that are just coming back into the main room. It'll take a few minutes for everyone to get in, as always. Some people are quick off the mark, and others, want to finish our point, and we get booted out just before the most important thing I was going to say. Yeah, hopefully everyone will be back in just a few seconds. So sit tight for a few seconds. But I hope that was an interesting and valuable chat that you had with other comrades across the call. Esther, if you want to let me know when you think everybody's back in, and then
It should be now. Everyone's back.
fantastic, cool. Welcome back, everyone who's just coming back into the main room. Hopefully, you found that a nice chat is always good. An interesting chat, useful chat, any of those things. We'll take all of them. And yeah, welcome back into the main room. We had 3 groups, and we've got about 10 minutes. So actually, I think there probably is time for a little bit of kind of verbal feedback. It's always kind of nice to hear what conversations happened in each other's spaces, and then we'll start to wrap things up for the night. Now I'm gonna say it in terms of does somebody want to feedback from room 1? You probably don't know if you were in room 1.
I can say who was in which room.
If there's a name you recognise, maybe Esther, then basically, if you want to come in and say a few things that struck you as interesting in the conversation in your group, maybe just type in the chat box now, and we'll just bring in a couple of people and hopefully get a spread from across the room. So I'll give you a moment to think if there's something you want to feed back to the rest of the group that you thought was particularly valuable in that. While you're thinking about whether you want to say something along those lines, a few of us stayed obviously in the main room, and we had some really interesting conversations about, I suppose, fundamentally about workers' power, and about how we build it. And as you build workers' power and as you gain a voice, for instance, we're thinking about already having seats on pension boards and things like that. How do you build more workers' power without jeopardizing what we've already won? And how do you scale that up to the extent necessary to make the transformations that we need to make? So I think those are really big challenges and questions for us, as certainly those of us that are trade union activists and organisers. So that was a kind of thought from me and from the group space I was in. Does anyone want to come in for? I'm going to say group 1, but you won't know if you're in group 1. But if anyone wants to come in and feedback anything that was of interest in your group. So Christine, I've got you first. In you come. I think if you're speaking, Christine, you might be on mute. The curse of Zoom. It always gets us. Christine, I might see if there's anybody else and come back to you if you manage to figure out your microphone, because you're not coming in at the moment. Does anybody else want to come in for a group? Anything that you want to say that you thought was interesting or instructive in your space? Ian Hewitt, any comment?
Well, I've jumped in. Others might be able to give a better account, but I was quite inspired by the idea of collectivizing the idea of pensions. We tend to think of pensions as being a personal security. It's your way out of the madness that is the current economy. Whereas if pensions were a resource, collective resource for the future, then maybe that's a different way of thinking about it. And maybe young people would be more prepared to get involved in campaigning if it offered a future for everybody rather than individuals. So, but we were told that there are structural problems. So if we start talking about whatever it's called, restitution of, climate debts, then we've got a problem that the current way pensions are configured, they're likely to collapse. And my response to that was, you start little and grow. So, so I still like the co-op movement, the idea that you build a different sort of society. So this word equitable, we need to recapture that.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, quite agree. New world in the shell of the old type of approach to things. Yeah, thanks. Christine, do you feel able to come in? I don't know if you're able to get your microphone working. Or if anybody else wants to put your hands up and come on in, very, very welcome. If not a problem at all. What we'll do is we'll start to wrap things up. But what I want to say is, again, firstly, a huge thank you to our speakers, to Stephen Smiley, Unison, to Rob Noyes from Platform, and from Lizette Middens from Fossil Free Netherlands. Huge thank you for your contributions. It was so interesting, so inspiring. But most of all, as always, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you who've taken time out of your evening to join the call, to learn, to discuss, to share ideas, and of course, what you're doing in day out, campaigning, organising, trying to change our world, trying to make things better. That's what we need more of. Before we finish, I said to some of our friends that we would just give a shout out to an event that's coming up, in the sense that the deadline to apply for this event is closing on the 4th of August. So you've only got about 7-8 days, I think, to apply for this. There's a new organising conference happening 8 till 10 of September in Liverpool. As I say, deadline for applications to that are the 4th of August. It's a pay what you can afford event. And they have a huge plethora of workshops and talks and trainings, all about organising and campaigning. How do we build power? How do we win? There are sessions on climate justice, but there are a lot of other things as well. But it's more about the how we actually make change. And then obviously this is part of the climate. Tonight's event is part of the Climate Justice Coalition's programme. We Make Tomorrow, thinking about workers' power and how we literally make tomorrow, and how we can change our world for the better. We will be organising a second We Make Tomorrow national conference, international conference even, looking to be in London in mid-November, dates to be confirmed. So I'll just put the various bits of information in the chat box. That's it though, we'll close for this evening. Huge thanks again to everybody who has been with us tonight and participated, and thanks very much. Hope to see you soon. Keep in touch, keep organising, keep fighting, hopefully keep winning. Cheers.
Right, I think I'll just close the call probably. Thank you everyone, that was great.
Huge thank you everyone. Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers everyone. Bye.
Bye.